The door creaked open, and I froze, my pencil hovering over the sketchbook as moonlight sliced through the blinds. My stepdad, Tom, stood there, his silhouette filling the frame, his breath heavy with something unspoken. I was 16, and in that moment, I knew whatever he was about to say would change everything. My name is Eli Carter, and I grew up in Willow Creek, a sleepy town in Ohio where everyone knew your business before you did. It was 2017, and I was just another kid trying to blend in, hiding parts of myself like contraband. My sketches were my escape pages filled with vibrant figures, boys holding hands under starlit skies, moments I could only dream of living. But in Willow Creek, dreams like those were dangerous. My mom, Lisa, was a nurse who worked late shifts, leaving me with Tom, her husband of 3 years. He was a quiet man, a mechanic with calloused hands and a heart I couldn't quite read. He wasn't cruel, but he wasn't warm either, not until that night. The air in my room felt thick as Tom stepped inside, closing the door softly behind him. I shoved my sketchbook under the pillow, my heart hammering. I'd been caught drawing once before, by a kid at school who'd called me a slur and laughed. I couldn't handle Tom seeing it. Not him. Not the guy who'd married my mom and tried so hard to be a dad, even when I pushed him away. Eli, he said, his voice low, almost a whisper. We need to talk. I braced myself, expecting a lecture about grades or chores. But his eyes were different tonight, soft, almost sad. He sat on the edge of my bed, the mattress dipping under his weight, and I noticed his hands trembling slightly. Tom, the guy who could fix a carburetor blindfolded, was nervous. That scared me more than anything. I saw your drawings, he said, and my stomach dropped. Not tonight. A while back, when you left your book on the kitchen table. I wanted to disappear. My sketches weren't just art, they were confessions. Every line, every curve, was a piece of me I'd kept locked away. Boys with gentle smiles, their fingers intertwined, their faces close enough to kiss. I'd drawn them in secret, late at night, when the world felt safe enough to let my truth breathe. And now Tom knew. I'm not mad, he continued, his voice steady but thick with emotion. I need you to know something about me. Something I've never told anyone. Not even your mom. I stared at him, my throat tight. The room felt smaller, the walls closing in. What could Tom, with his flannel shirts and toolbox, possibly have to say that tied to my sketches? I didn't trust myself to speak, so I just nodded, my fingers digging into the blanket. He took a deep breath, his gaze dropping to the floor. When I was your age, I was in love. His name was Jamie. The words hit like a thunderclap. My stepdad, Tom, the guy who watched football and drank Budweiser, was telling me he'd loved a man. I couldn't process it. My mind spun, caught between shock and something else, something like relief. I wasn't alone. Tom's voice cracked as he went on. We were best friends. Grew up in a town even smaller than this one. Back then, in the 90s, you didn't talk about it. You didn't even think it too loud. But Jamie, he was fearless. He'd hold my hand when no one was looking, and for a little while, I felt free. I swallowed hard, my eyes burning. I wanted to ask a million questions. What happened? Why didn't it last? Did Mom know? But I couldn't find my voice. Tom looked at me, his eyes searching mine, like he was waiting for me to judge him. But I didn't. I couldn't. All I could think was that maybe, just maybe, he understood. I'm telling you this because I see you, Eli, he said. I see how you hide. And I don't want you to spend your life hiding like I did. The weight of his words settled over me, heavy and warm, like a blanket I didn't know I needed. For the first time, I saw Tom not as my stepdad, not as the guy who married my mom, but as someone who'd carried a secret just like mine. Someone who'd loved and lost, and still found a way to keep going. We sat in silence for a while, the only sound the faint hum of crickets outside. I wanted to say something, to tell him I was gay, that I'd known since I was 12, that I was terrified of what it meant in a town like this. But the words stuck in my throat. Instead, I pulled the sketchbook from under my pillow and handed it to him. He took it, his fingers careful, like he was holding something sacred. He flipped through the pages, his expression softening with each sketch. "These are beautiful," he said finally. "You've got a gift, kid." I didn't know how to respond, so I just nodded, my chest tight with something I couldn't name. It wasn't just gratitude, it was hope. For the first time, I felt seen, not as a kid with a secret, but as Eli, the boy who loved art and dreamed of a life where he could be himself. That night, as Tom left my room, he paused at the door. "You don't have to tell me anything you're not ready to," he said. "But when you are, I'm here." The door closed, and I lay back on my bed, staring at the ceiling. The world felt different now, bigger and scarier, but also brighter. Tom's story wasn't just his, it was a lifeline, a promise that I could survive this. I didn't know what came next, but for the first time, I wasn't afraid to find out. The next morning, I woke up with Tom's words echoing in my head. "I see you, Eli." They felt like a secret I wasn't ready to carry, but also like a key to something I'd been locked out of my whole life. I stayed in bed longer than usual, my sketchbook open on my chest, wondering if I'd imagined the whole thing. Downstairs, the smell of coffee and bacon pulled me out of my haze. Mom was already gone for her shift at the hospital, and Tom was at the stove, flipping pancakes like nothing had happened. I hesitated in the doorway, watching him. He looked the same faded jeans, same flannel shirt, but everything felt different. He glanced up and gave me a small nod, like we were sharing a quiet understanding. "Morning," he said, sliding a plate toward me. "You sleep okay?" "Yeah," I mumbled, sitting at the table. The pancakes were golden, perfect, but my stomach was too knotted to eat. I kept replaying his story about Jamie, trying to picture a younger Tom, sneaking handholds in a world that didn't want them. It made me wonder who else in Willow Creek was hiding, carrying pieces of themselves they couldn't show. School that day was a blur. I sat through algebra and history, barely hearing the teachers. My best friend, Marcus, noticed something was off. He was the only one at school who knew I was gay, or at least, the only one I'd told. Marcus was black, a track star with a laugh that could fill a room, and he'd never judged me. But even he didn't know about my sketches or the weight I carried every day. "You good, man?" he asked at lunch, tossing a fry at me. We were at our usual table in the corner of the cafeteria, away from the jocks and their loud laughter. I shrugged, picking at my food. "Just stuff at home." He raised an eyebrow but didn't push. "You know I'm here, right?" I nodded, grateful but not ready to spill. How could I explain Tom's confession? Or the fact that I was still too scared to say the words out loud. "I'm gay." Marcus would get it, but saying it felt like crossing a line I couldn't uncross. That afternoon, I had art club, the one place I felt like I could breathe. Our teacher, Ms. Rivera, was a painter with wild curly hair and a knack for seeing through people's walls. She'd been the one to encourage my sketches, telling me they had soul. Today, she'd set up a still life apples, a vase, some draped fabric, but I couldn't focus. My pencil kept drifting, sketching two hands clasped together, one rough and calloused, the other soft and young. "Eli, Ms. Rivera said, peering over my shoulder. This is new. What's the story behind it? I froze, my face heating up. Just something I was thinking about. She smiled, her eyes kind but piercing. Art's always got a story. Keep going. I wanted to keep going, but the fear crept back in. What if someone saw? What if they knew? I tucked the sketch away and forced myself to draw the apples instead, but my heart wasn't in it. When I got home, Tom was in the garage, working on an old motorcycle he'd been restoring. I lingered by the door, watching him tighten a bolt, his hands steady and sure. I wanted to ask about Jamie, about what happened after high school, but the words felt too big. Hey, he said, glancing up. Want to help? I hesitated, then grabbed a wrench, mostly to have something to do with my hands. We worked in silence for a while, the clink of tools filling the space. Finally, I couldn't hold it in anymore. What happened to Jamie? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Tom's hands stilled. He didn't look at me, just stared at the bike like it held all the answers. He moved away. He said finally. Went to college in Chicago. I stayed here. Got a job at the shop. We tried to keep in touch, but life got in the way. There was a heaviness in his voice, a grief that hadn't faded. I wanted to ask more, but something in his expression told me to let it be. Instead, I tightened a bolt, mimicking his movements. You ever think about finding him? I asked. Tom's jaw tightened. Every day? But I made my choices. Married your mom. Built a life. It's not perfect, but it's mine. I nodded, not sure what to say. His honesty was raw, like a wound that hadn't healed. It made me think about my own choices, the ones I hadn't made yet. Would I hide forever? Or would I be brave like Jamie, fearless in a world that wasn't ready? That night, I sat at my desk, sketching again. This time, it wasn't just hand-sit with two figures, one older, one younger, standing side by side under a starry sky. I didn't know if it was Tom and Jamie or me and someone I hadn't met yet. But for the first time, I didn't hide the sketch under my pillow. I left it out, open, like a small act of courage. The weeks that followed felt like walking on a tightrope. Tom's confession had cracked something open in me, but I wasn't sure what to do with it. I started noticing things, small glances he'd give me when I talked about school, the way he'd linger in the doorway of my room, like he was waiting for me to say something back. Mom was oblivious, her days consumed by double shifts at the hospital. She'd come home exhausted, her smile tired but genuine, and I wondered what she'd think if she knew. Tom said he hadn't told her about Jamie, and I hadn't told her about me. We were a house full of secrets, held together by love and silence. At school, things got harder. A kid named Derek, a senior with a mean streak, had started picking up on my quietness. He'd seen me sketching in the library once and made a comment about pretty boys that made my skin crawl. I avoided him, but Willow Creek High was small, and he seemed to be everywhere, leaning against lockers, smirking in the halls. One day, he cornered me after gym class. I was changing in the locker room, my shirt half on, when he snatched my sketchbook from my bag. What's this? Carter, he said, flipping through the pages. My heart stopped as he landed on a sketch of two boys kissing under a tree. His grin was cruel. You're one of those. Huh? I grabbed for the book, but he held it out of reach, laughing. Give it back, I said, my voice shaking. Or what? He stepped closer, his breath hot and sour. You gonna cry? Fairy. Before I could respond, Marcus appeared, shoving Derek hard enough to make him stumble. Back off, Marcus said, his voice low and dangerous. Derek laughed, but tossed the sketchbook to the floor and walked away, muttering slurs under his breath. Marcus picked up the book and handed it to me. "You okay?" I nodded, but I wasn't. My hands shook as I stuffed the sketchbook into my bag. Marcus didn't ask about the drawing, but I could feel his questions hanging in the air. I wanted to tell him, but fear kept the words locked inside. That night, I told Tom what happened. We were in the garage again, the motorcycle gleaming under the fluorescent lights. I didn't plan to say anything, but the story spilled out. Derek, the sketch, Marcus stepping in. Tom listened, his face unreadable, until I finished. "Kids like that," he said, wiping his hands on a rag. "They're scared too. Scared of anything different. But that doesn't make it easier." I looked at him, surprised. "You ever deal with guys like that?" "Back then." He nodded, his eyes distant. "All the time. Jamie was better at brushing it off. Me, I took it harder. Felt like I had to prove I was something I wasn't." I thought about that, about how exhausting it must have been to hide for so long. "How'd you get through it?" I asked. Tom leaned against the workbench, his gaze steady. "Found people who saw me. Really saw me. Jamie was one. Your mom's another. You need that, Eli. People who'll stand by you." His words hit hard, and I thought about Marcus, about MS. Rivera, about Tom himself. Maybe I wasn't as alone as I thought. But the fear was still there, sharp and cold, whispering that coming out would ruin everything. The next day, I went to art club early, needing the quiet. MS. Rivera was there, setting up easels. She took one look at me and knew something was wrong. "Talk to me, Eli," she said, her voice gentle but firm. I hesitated, then pulled out my sketchbook and showed her the drawing Derek had seen. Her eyes softened as she studied it. "This is powerful," she said. "You're telling a story here. Don't let anyone make you ashamed of it." Her words were like Thomas A. Lifeline. I didn't tell her I was gay, but I didn't need to. She saw me, just like Tom did. And for the first time, I wondered if I could be brave enough to let others see me too. That night, I started a new sketch: a boy standing tall, his back to a crowd, his face lit by stars. It was me, or who I wanted to be. I left it on my desk, where Tom might see it, a silent promise to keep talking, to keep trying. The air in Willow Creek grew colder as fall settled in, mirroring the chill in my chest. Derek's taunts didn't stowfeed whisper slurs when teachers weren't looking, his friends snickering behind him. I kept my head down, but every word felt like a cut, reopening wounds I didn't know I had. Tom's confession had given me courage, but it wasn't enough to face the world outside my room. Marcus started sticking closer, walking me to classes, his presence a quiet shield. One day, after Derek accidentally bumped me in the hall, Marcus pulled me aside. "You gotta tell someone, Eli. A teacher. MS. Rivera. Someone." I shook my head. "It'll make it worse." He frowned, his eyes searching mine. "You don't have to do this alone." I wanted to tell him everything about Tom, about my sketches, about the fear that kept me up at night. But I couldn't. Not yet. Instead, I mumbled a thanks and changed the subject. At home, Tom and I fell into a new rhythm. He'd ask about my day, really ask, and I'd tell him bits and pieces about art club, about Marcus, even about Derek, though I downplayed it. He'd listen, nodding, sometimes sharing stories about his own high school days. He never pushed me to come out, but I could feel the space he was holding for me, like a door left open. One evening, Mom was home for dinner, a rare occurrence. We sat around the kitchen table, eating lasagna, and she talked about a patient who'd made her laugh that day. Tom was quieter than usual, his eyes flicking to me now and then. I wondered if he was thinking about Jamie, or about me, or both. Eli, you're awfully quiet, Mom said, her smile teasing. What's going on in that head of yours? I froze, my fork halfway to my mouth. For a split second, I imagined telling her mom, I'm gay. But the words wouldn't come. Instead, I shrugged and said, just school stuff. She nodded, but her eyes lingered, like she knew there was more. Tom reached for another slice of garlic bread, his movements casual, but I caught the way he looked at me, like he was willing me to be brave. Later, in the garage, I asked him, did you ever want to tell your parents about Jamie? He set down his wrench, his face thoughtful. Every day? But my dad, he wasn't the kind of man you told things to. And my mom, she would have worried herself sick. So I kept it inside. I nodded, understanding more than I wanted to. Mom was different. She was kind, open-minded, but the fear of disappointing her was paralyzing. What if she doesn't get it? I asked, my voice small. Tom's eyes softened. She loves you, Eli. More than anything. She'll get there. His words stayed with me, but so did the doubt. That night, I sketched again, this time a family, 3 figures sitting at a table, their faces blurred but their hands reaching for each other. It was a dream, a hope, but it felt closer than ever. The next day at school, things escalated. Derek and his friends followed me to the parking lot after art club, their laughter sharp and mocking. I tried to walk faster, but Derek grabbed my arm, spinning me around. Where you going? Carter. Got more fairy drawings to hide. Before I could respond, Marcus was there, shoving Derek back. Leave him alone, he growled. Derek's eyes narrowed, but he backed off, his friends pulling him away. Marcus turned to me, his face tight with worry. Eli, this is getting bad. You got to do something. I nodded, my throat tight. He was right, but I didn't know what. All I knew was that I couldn't keep hiding, not from Derek, not from myself, and maybe not from Mom. That night, I sat in my room, staring at my latest sketch. It was Tom and me, standing side by side, our faces lit by courage. I didn't hide it. I left it open, a small rebellion against the fear that had held me for so long. The tension at school kept building, like a storm ready to break. Derek's taunts grew bolder, his friends egging him on, and I started dreading the hallways. Marcus was a lifeline, but even he couldn't be everywhere. I started skipping lunch, hiding in the art room, where Ms. Rivera let me work in peace. One afternoon, she caught me staring at a blank canvas, my pencil idle. Eli, she said, sitting beside me, what's weighing you down? I wanted to tell her about Derek, about my fear, about Tom's secret and mine. But all I could manage was, it's hard to be me. She nodded, her eyes warm. Being yourself is the bravest thing you can do. Whatever you're carrying, you don't have to carry it alone. Her words echoed Tom's, and I felt a spark of courage. Maybe I didn't have to hide forever. Maybe I could find a way to be me, even in Willow Creek. That night, Tom and I worked on the motorcycle again. It was nearly finished, its chrome gleaming under the garage lights. As we polished the fenders, I asked, do you ever regret it? Not being with Jamie. Tom's hands paused, his rag still against the metal. Regret's a tricky thing, he said. I love Jamie, but I love your mom too. I made a choice, and it's brought me here. To you. His words hit me hard, and I realized how much he meant to Minute just as my stepdad, but as someone who'd shown me I could survive. I wanted to tell him I was gay, to say the words out loud, but fear still held me back. The next day, everything changed. I was leaving art club when Derek and his friends blocked my path in the parking lot. Got any new drawings? Carter. Derek sneered, stepping closer. I tried to push past, but he grabbed my sketchbook from my bag and tore it open. My heart stopped as he held up a sketch of two boys embracing, his laughter cutting through the air. Look at this. Fairy Boy's got a whole book of this crap. Before I could react, Marcus was there, yanking the sketchbook away. But Derek swung at him, and suddenly they were fighting, fists flying as kids gathered, shouting. I stood frozen, panic clawing at my chest, until Ms. Rivera appeared, pulling them apart. In the principal's office, Derek played the victim, claiming Marcus started it. I wanted to scream the truth, but my voice wouldn't work. Marcus looked at me, his lip bloody, his eyes pleading for me to say something. But I didn't. I couldn't. That night, I told Tom everything. He listened, his face darkening as I described the fight. You did what you could, he said, but I shook my head. I didn't do anything, I said, my voice breaking. Marcus got hurt because of me, and I just stood there. Tom put a hand on my shoulder, his grip firm. You're not responsible for what Derek did, but you can decide what you do next. I nodded, tears burning my eyes. I didn't know what next looked like, but I knew I couldn't keep running. That night, I sketched Marcus, his face fierce and loyal, standing between me and the world. It was my way of saying thank you, even if I couldn't say it out loud. The fallout from the fight was swift. Marcus got a week's suspension, while Derek got off with a warning, his dad being some big shot on the school board. I felt sick with guilt, avoiding Marcus's calls, unable to face him. I'd let him down, and the shame was crushing. At home, Mom noticed my mood. Eli, what's wrong? She asked one night, her hand on my arm. I wanted to tell her everything about me, about Tom, about Marcus, but the words stayed trapped. I mumbled something about school stress and fled to my room. Tom found me there, sketching furiously, my pencil digging into the paper. You're carrying a lot, he said, sitting on my bed. Talk to me. I told him about Marcus, about how I'd frozen, about the guilt eating me alive. He listened, his face calm but serious. You're not perfect, Eli, he said. None of us are. But you can make it right. How? I asked, my voice raw. Start with the truth, he said. Tell Marcus what he means to you. Tell someone at school what's been happening. It's scary, but it's the only way. His words stuck with me, and the next day, I found Marcus at the track, running laps alone. I waited until he stopped, his breath heavy, his eyes wary. I'm sorry, I said, the words spilling out. I should have said something. I was scared, but that's no excuse. Marcus looked at me, his expression softening. I know you're scared, Eli, but I've got your back. Always. I took a deep breath, my heart pounding. I'm gay, I said, the words shaky but real. It was the first time I'd said them out loud, and they felt like freedom. Marcus grinned, pulling me into a hug. Took you long enough, man. We laughed, and for the first time in weeks, I felt lighter. But school wasn't done with me. Derek's taunts continued, and I knew I had to do more. With Tom's encouragement, I went to Ms. Rivera and told her everything about Derek, about the sketches, about who I was. She listened, her eyes fierce, and promised to take it to the principal. That night, I showed Tom the sketch of Marcus. He smiled, his eyes proud. "You're finding your way, kid," he said. "I'm proud of you." I went to bed feeling stronger, but still scared. The truth was out, but the world wasn't done testing me. The school took action, but it wasn't enough. Derek got a 3-day suspension, but his friends kept the whispers alive, their eyes following me in the halls. I felt exposed, like my truth was a spotlight I couldn't turn off. But Marcus was there, an MS. Rivera checked in daily, her quiet support a reminder that I wasn't alone. At home, I knew I had to tell Mom. The thought terrified me, but Tom's story and Marcus's loyalty gave me courage. One night, when she got home early, I asked her to sit with me in the living room. Tom was there too, his presence steady. "Mom," I said, my voice trembling, "I'm gay." She blinked, her face a mix of surprise and something else, love. Maybe. Or fear. "Oh, Eli," she said, her voice soft. "Are you sure?" I nodded, tears spilling over. "I've known for a while. I was just scared to tell you." She pulled me into a hug, her arms tight. "I love you," she said. "No matter what." Tom watched us, his eyes glistening. Later, he told me he'd talk to her about Jamie, when the time was right. For now, it was enough that she knew me, that she still loved me. The next week, I submitted a piece to the school art show, a painting of 2 boys under a starry sky, their hands clasped, their faces brave. MS. Rivera helped me hang it, her smile proud. When Derek saw it, he sneered, but I didn't care. I wasn't hiding anymore. At the show, Mom and Tom came, their hands linked as they studied my painting. Mom's eyes were wet, but she smiled. "It's beautiful, Eli," she said. Tom just nodded, but I saw the pride in his face. That night, Tom and I finished the motorcycle. We took it for a ride, the wind rushing past, the stars above us bright. As we pulled back into the driveway, he turned to me. "You're going to be okay, Eli," he said. "Better than okay." I believed him. The road ahead wasn't easy. Willow Creek wasn't ready for me, and maybe it never would be. But I had Tom, Mom, Marcus, and MS. Rivera. I had my art, my truth, and the courage to keep going. And that was enough.